It's 1851 and we're in London. The city wasn't just busy, it was the proud center of the biggest empire in the world. And right in the middle stood the Crystal Palace, a huge building of glass and iron, a symbol of British power. Inside, Britain was showing off everything it could. I'm talking machines, weapons, and most of all, its unpickable locks. These locks weren't just tools, they were seen as the empire's biggest protectors. They were guarding banks, mail, the Queen's jewels, and they were also seen as a status symbol where rich people were showing off that they had valuables to lock away. Then walked in a quiet American with a small bag full of bent wires and a smile on his face. He was a salesman, so I can imagine the smile could have been sleazy. He looked at the locks and he said, "I'll open all of them before tea time." What? Of course, this bold promise set off bets, anger, and the biggest scare of the Victorian times. Think about that time when your colleagues opened phishing attack email and you had to sit for endless hours of security training. This is not like that though. This is going to be a story of how one man embarrassed an empire and how you can use some of these tactics to embarrass your haters. So in 1851, Britain ruled the seas and led the world in industry. Half of the world's iron and coal came from Britain. The Great Exhibition was their way to brag about it. 19 acres of inventions and engineering. Among the many wonders were two locks that were treated like celebrities. They were like the Beyonce of their time. I mean, people were paying tickets to go see these locks. The Chubb detector lock, which was invented back in 1818. This lock had a secret lever inside, so if you tried to pick it, the lock would jam forever. I don't know if you've watched, what is that film? Army of Thieves. That's what I'm picturing, you know? And then it locks forever. Yeah, something like that. And then the Brahma lock, which was on the market for 6 to 3 years. It was famous for its challenge. So the inventor was so confident that he set a challenge that said he would give 200 guineas to anybody that would try to pick it. And for 6 to 3 years, no one had. No one even tried. Well, maybe they did try, but then no one succeeded. The design was so complex. Even the police carried it around and wore it with pride. I can imagine how good it was for a police officer to feel like they can just walk around wearing a lock. British newspapers, they called these locks iron protectors of the empire because everybody was using them, including Commonwealth countries. Well, countries that are in the Commonwealth now, so I'm guessing colonies. That's what we can call them. People believed they were truly unbeatable. So when an American salesman claimed he could pick them both, and worse, before tea time, of course, people laughed. They were betting 10 to 1 he would for sure fail. I mean, why would you have time? But also, think of it this way. There are times when you have set yourself up to do something, to go for that vision and that goal, and you tell people, and people tell you that it's not going to work, and then you don't listen to them, and then you do it anyway. And then they start betting against you. Yeah, so maybe stick around and then see how this story unfolds. The American's name was Alfred Charlse Hobbs. Not that Hobbs, but this Hobbs. He wasn't a fancy gentleman. He was a salesperson from Boston working for an American lock company. But Hobbs had a secret weapon. He thought like a burglar. He studied locks from the view of someone trying to beat them. Also, from a view of someone who's trying to meet his sales quota. He arrived in London with blank keys, some oil, and his tools, and he bought a ticket to the Crystal Palace, walked right to the Chubb and asked, "Mind if I try?" The British staff thought it would be funny to see him fail. They even made it a public challenge. The newspapers offered $100. So $100 then, like in 1818, that would be so much more now. It's worth probably, I want to say 10,000. Don't quote me on this. Let's all go to Google after watching this episode and then come and tell me in the comments how much it's worth. Okay, so they offered £100 to anyone who could prove him wrong. But to be honest, even if they'd offered me £100 in this day and age, I would have probably tried. But Hobbs wasn't about to embarrass himself. He was about to embarrass the empire. And everybody was laughing at him and silence his haters. On a rainy day, the crowd gathered to watch the Hobbs try to fight the Chubb. People were ready to laugh at him. Hobbs calmly took out his thin steel and he began working. 10 minutes passed. And the crowd was getting restless. And then, click, the lock opened. Gasps filled the hole. They tried again. Same result. Because sometimes like it's a fluke, beginner's luck, do it again. The Queen's trusted lock, once thought impossible to beat, was now useless. Newspapers called it a feat of skill. You see how that quickly turned around? Cartoons showed a grinning Uncle Sam standing over a sad British lion, but Hobbs wasn't finished. The Brahma lock still stood. He had another assignment. History often changes in small moments, like how one man with a small piece of wire changed the history of security. If you like stories about how brains beat power, how about you hit the subscribe button? Because what happens next took 16 days and nearly caused a debate in Parliament. After beating the Chubbs, of course he had to turn his attention to the Brahma lock. This was the one no one had ever opened, the one which had the 200 Guinness challenge set by the inventor. He asked for a private table, some lamps, and permission to work in peace. And day after day, he studied the lock, filing keys, testing, and listening to the tiny clicks inside, because sometimes you need precision. By day 6, newspapers were back to laughing at him again. See, again, quick turnaround. The Yankee is stuck. The empire is safe. We can all sleep better at night. But Hobbs wasn't stuck. He was patient. He developed a careful method, moving one tiny piece at a time, like tuning a guitar string. Not that I know anything about that. On day 14, he had a soft click. The lock moved. He smiled and left the hole. He came back 2 days later. So on day 16, he slid his custom key, turned it, and the lock popped open. The impossible lock was beaten. The crowd was silent. The committee had no choice but to pay him his 200 Guinness. Better have my money. The news spread fast. Parliament held debates. The banks in India and the colonies were demanding new keys. The lock companies rushed to redesign their products. The Brahma added new protections. The Chubb built new models. Of course, the newspapers are back. Cartoons mocked Britain, showing Uncle Sam laughing while John Bull struggled with the safe. One magazine wrote, an empire that defeated armies was defeated by bent wires. But from this humiliation came progress. Lock makers began holding public tests like today's big bounty programs in tech, and that was the initiation of modern locksmithing. What happened to Hobbs, I hear you ask? Well, after all that drama, Hobbs sold his company keys. I did say in the beginning, this guy was chasing a South Quarter. Not that this is in the history books or anything, but then I think behind all the drama, this is the reason why he was doing it. He was, he had a target, was going to get a commission. But he later on invented his own locks and even advised in the U.S. Army. Actually, it's U.S. Navy, not the Army. When he was asked why he did it, he simply said, locks are promises in metal, and someone has to prove when the promise is false. I kind of like that. So there it is. One American, one bag full of wires, and the 4 of Britain's unpickable locks. The Chubb fell in 15 minutes and the Brahma fell in 16 days. But this wasn't just a story about locks, unbeatable locks, sleazy salesmen. This was a really good reminder that nothing is truly unbreakable. Not the locks, not the system, not the habits, and not the limiting beliefs we sometimes place in our life. The real question is, what lock in your life are you ready to test? Hi, my name is Kuda, and thank you for tuning into the Quest Finders. I hope you loved and enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you found it educational, entertaining, or just like the vibe, share with your friends and let's make it to 600 together. But until next time, bye for now.